To pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Orr?
Here.
Councilman Baker?
Here.
Councilman Martinez?
Here.
Councilwoman Phillips-Rue?
Here.
Councilman Edwards? Councilwoman Manager? Here. And Councilman Billigram?
Present.
Okay, we're going to do the presentation of the 2015 budget. Notice the hearing of ordinance adoption schedule. That'd be Mary?
There is a new, at this point it's still probably not fully final, but at the end of the day, I think there's like 23,000 that'll be to the good. I always think you should have a little cushion just because you never know if your revenues are going to meet or your expenses are going to go over. So some of the things that were changed in order to get there was some revenue items were bumped up a little, some expenses were cut. Highlight would probably be, I think there was 10,000 cut off the project or the match.
What page, please?
Well, if you want to go through them all again,
Well,
one by one?
No, not necessarily, no. But if a few that may be changed, but.
A lot of them, almost all of them changed if you go down the list.
Okay.
Yeah, they might have changed 100, 200.
Well, I'm thinking
Yeah.
that the
Well,
15, 20,000.
the bigger movement, for example, the 2% sales tax, when Mary pointed out to me that we are going to, even though it says annualized 520, in reality, the bigger months are just now starting to come on. Mary pointed out that we are on schedule, quite possibly, to make last year's 549 projection. So instead of leaving it at 520, we took it to about, or 530, whatever it was, we took it to 540.
As well as the true value was not annexed in until July of this
Right,
year.
okay.
So,
Which helped a lot.
which will bump up. So
Okay.
that's why that number was probably one of the most significant revenue items.
Okay.
And it's still probably quite a bit lower than it will be. I mean, we still feel very good about the conservativeness of that letter.
All right, that's fine.
So that's pretty good sales tax for 549.
Yeah, 549 was last year, and now
And you-
we're still dropping that, even though we think we will probably get to 549 this year. So we could go higher on that one, but we feel pretty good
Okay,
with that.
that's fine.
Well, and I can add, I mean, that was like 10,000 increase. The business tax, we didn't do anything with. License and permits went up 5,000, bumped up building permits a little, and subdivision fees just a little, like 2,000 and 2,000 on both of those.
Business licensing.
Okay.
What's that?
Mary, which one of the items?
That's on page one, we're on page one.
Yeah, we were
I don't
10,000
wanna go
last
over
year.
That's all we did, that's all.
No, just out of curiosity, which item did
Okay.
we cut down?
The biggest one,
The biggest one.
Just the
for
big one.
expense was changing the healthcare. It had
Okay.
almost $60,000 impact by changing the deductible from a 600 deductible to a 1,500 deductible, with the city picking up that $900 difference, not the employees. I did build in enough for 7 people if they were hospitalized, which is 7 times 9 is 6,300. So that had the biggest impact. I don't know why you were not ever told that that could have been a choice years ago. I don't know. I did verify with the healthcare provider before I did build it in that they would allow that we could go back to our employees as of January 1 and go to that without any, because we were on a July 1 change, and what they did is they did an 18-month renewal with it either ending in July of next year, or you could change in January and go through the whole year. So that actually had the biggest impact.
And our employees, If I
will have a
remember correctly,
meeting.
they're all on board with it, right?
Every manager that I've talked to is, because what will also happen is their premiums will go down on their 20% as well. So
Good.
they're going to have a positive impact from their payroll standpoint, as well as we will reap a lot of benefits from the employer. Because we're paying 80%, they're paying 20. So a premium for a family coverage, I wish I'd have brought it with me. It was gonna go up to like 1,650 or around 1,700, and then now be 1,300 a month.
Good.
So their 20% is automatically less.
Thank you. That's good work. It really is. Thank you.
So that's where the big, the most significant.
Okay.
There were a couple other items, but that's where the biggest impact at the end of the day.
Any other questions, Mary? Or Mary, do you want to bring up anything else
Again,
that looks out of the
we were
ordinary?
just we were getting to 200, 300. It was just like, okay, where do we get? And when I ran the numbers on the healthcare, it actually had the biggest impact.
Okay.
We did maintain the 1%
Increase in
increase.
the step.
Well, we gave the 1% step increase, the 1% COLA, but we also did maintain the 1% insurance for, and remember, that's for the non-police officers, because the police officers already have FPPA, so they already have a good retirement plan. So we did maintain that 1%, and the council had wanted us to keep in. That is in there for now. When you get to the Public Works Streets budget, you can see
Tell them what page that's on.
on page 7, I believe.
Is it the pages listed on?
Yes, they are all correct. Down the bottom.
We did maintain 30,000 in the major streets improvements. Then when we go to the grant part, how much did we maintain on the
I
grant
believe we
match?
maintained 40 on the grant match, and I actually moved it out of the Public Works streets and put it into.
Yeah, in the back page, 45,000 actually there. So 45,000 in grant match and 30,000 in the major streets projects. That's what's in there at this time.
So at one point in time, it was 50, so we dropped it down to 45, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other one, we wanted to have it, as much as possible, but right now 30 is the number that's in there for now.
Okay.
Some of the other changes is that some of the percentage increases for staff did come back down a little bit on a few. For the most part, we tried to maintain what Mike had put in there from the original. We did change, maybe there was 5 or 10 individuals down that may have gone from 7 to 4%. So,
The thought being there that if we're able to actually get the savings from the dispatch consolidation, they could get another step at that point. This way most of them got the 1% COLA and a 3% step. A lot of that was dependent upon department head evaluations, and they rated those that they felt were most deserving at the different levels. And
Mike, taking a step away from this, has that dispatcher aspect of the UIGA been confirmed as to what the city's role is going to be in it, in terms of our dispatchers?
but what our costs will be, you mean?
No. We had to let some go, we had to keep some, because that could have a potential impact
Well,
on dollars.
Right, we've tried to minimize, we've tried to make sure that all comp time, and that we're really on top of the vacation accrual. The employee who has the highest salary over there is having a baby, so her leaves are largely going to be gone. In fact, they're pretty much all going to be gone. And the rest of them, we've tried to keep that as tight as we possibly can. We will have to pay out their accrued vacation, it appears, is the direction that that board wants to go. I still think they should leave 1 week on the books for anybody who has a week, and just roll that over, because I think that's only fair to those employees to try to preserve some kind of a vacation, although getting it bought out for them, I guess, is a positive for them. But it will have obviously, there's a little bit of me that wants to take care of the employees, and there's a little bit of me that wants to save a week vacation for each of them too, so, you know.
Thank you.
The street lighting here, is that just for the electricity of the street lighting?
Yeah, and that's actually down from previous years because we economized on it last year and got with them on, economizing isn't even the right term, but basically, we got with them last year and got them to bill us in a more consistent manner, so our street lighting bill is actually quite a bit less this year than it was in previous years.
That's still pretty
Yeah.
high. If we had LED lighting, it'd probably cut that way down.
The message,
48,000.
the message we're getting when we looked at it was probably cut it a little bit, but it's not.
Initial
I would
investment
think
was too high, correct?
Yeah. Well, and remember, they don't meter. Those aren't metered.
No.
So they're just
Yeah.
charging us a flat
So
rate.
they're flat rate.
And how do we know that's even close to what it really was?
Well, we know that theoretically, each one's going to use this much electricity, it's going to turn off when it gets light and turn back on when it gets dark. And so theoretically, they should all be using about the same. But as we know, the lights get knocked out and then they come in and fix
A
them.
lot of them don't
Some
work
of them
and
turn
they're
on
still
in the
getting
middle of the day
charged.
when they're
yeah.
not supposed. So yeah, so it's basically, you know,
A guess.
It's a guess. It's
Good
an educated guess by the engineers at Black Hills.
Huh, imagine that.
I think theoretically, if they all work, we're pretty close. Or even if they're probably calculated if you're not working for a certain amount of time. But
Okay.
I really didn't have any changes on the water fund or any of the smaller funds from what we originally had given you. So,
And the cemeteries, not making much now, still.
cemetery is in all likelihood something that will never,
I know it. And we
No,
put all that money into that.
Columbarium.
well, we're budgeting to at least sell a couple of them this year. So it's only like $1,200, but
Did we sell anything this year?
none.
No, we haven't. We spent all that money for it, and
Okay.
we haven't even found someone that wants to rent one.
Maybe Charlotte could write a little bit that we have calendars available at very good price. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Sooner or later.
Okay. Yeah, that's a.
but remember last year we
Bad.
thought, you know, we weren't even going to make what we made on, you know, this year has actually been a relative banner year for
The cemetery?
cemetery.
Yeah,
But maybe that's not the,
because what? For,
the revenues have been relatively strong this year, put it that way.
is this the figure you're looking at here?
No, you go to revenues, you want to go back to page 2.
yeah.
Because I know the cemetery
We
is really
budgeted
a bad.
12,500 on grave openings. The projection is currently at 18,000. And really, unfortunately, the winter months, you know, are some of the better months. I hate to say that, but they really are. So we're really in a, the columbarium still has the 0 on it. The sale of cemetery plots is going fairly well, and the grave openings is going fairly well. Actually, sale of cemetery plots is huge, and that doesn't always mean people who died either, so that one's not
Yeah,
necessarily
Create.
as much of a depressing number.
okay. Moving on.
Any other questions on the budget? Obviously, you've got time to modify this before final passage.
The police impound, is this just on impound cars right here? That's
Whether
it?
Revenues or expenses?
Revenues, general fund. Is that what the police took in just for the impound cars, and that is nothing for the sale of what he's sold, or what?
Yeah, that's just the impound costs, and then it's offset by toll fees.
He's looking at the revenue side.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's offset then by the towing fees.
Okay.
So as you can see, that one is going better than projected.
Yeah, it's going pretty good. That's why I asked about it.
Then if you go to the expense side, the towing expense
Where?
on page 6, the towing expense, it's still to the positive, but it's, there's obviously, we greatly exceeded the number that we budgeted, but we also greatly exceeded the number of, so where we're projecting to spend, our budget said we were
Towing
gonna,
revenue.
yeah, our budget said we were going to bring in, I could find it again.
That's right.
I just said 9,000 for last year, and expense was was 1,000. I don't know what.
Well, the towing revenue,
No.
we showed being,
No.
we showed being
Oh, that's
1,000.
what- Yeah,
But the,
And we showed the expenses being, well, let's see, towing revenue, we said was gonna be 1,000, but in
it wasn't.
reality.
It wasn't.
it was,
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one, I'm gonna go to impound. Impound, we said 9,000, plus 1,000 from towing revenue, not sure exactly what the split is on that. But so we said 10,000, and now we're projecting, basically about 17,000, where expenses, so the net of that is, looks like it's gonna be about 7,000 for the good. On the other hand, the expenses, were projected to be 1,000, and they're gonna be 5,200. So, overall, we're ahead of where we had planned to be, but,
In other words, it's doing a whole lot better than the cemetery is.
well, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to compare.
I don't see how you can compare those two, but
I'm kind of glad that cemetery is not doing anything.
Okay, we really don't have the cemetery to do too well. I mean, we do, but we don't, you know. We want to sell some columbariums. is what we want to
Well,
do.
have we ever thought about having a sale on columbariums?
Well, I think that's what we're gonna have to do. We've had that
Blue light
discussion.
special or
We're gonna
what?
have to- We're gonna have to do some things to get the columbarium sold. At least prime that pump, so to speak. All right, any other questions on the budget? Mary, anything else you want to say?
no.
The ADA sidewalk improvements. Page 7. So this is what we spent compared to 2013 was 590.
What page is it?
Page 7. So we're getting quite a few of them done evidently by the numbers here.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
But we also exceeded the budget in that area.
Yeah, I
That's
see.
projection. Although in
900.
reality, we really probably won't get to the 7,900 because we're
That's
not,
annualized.
that's annualized. But
Because it went from a 590. So we must be getting quite a few of them done then.
yeah, we're trying. I mean, as you can see, in this year's budget, we took it up to 4,900 as the emphasis, and it looks like we're gonna end up spending, 5278. I don't think we did
Yeah,
any
it's
more.
on here, 5278.
That's what had been spent through August.
And I don't think we did any in September. I think the ADAs are all done before September started, weren't they? Trying to remember. There could be one more.
2 or 3.
that's what I thought. I think September.
Well,
May
maybe,
have all come in.
I keep thinking we still had one in September, didn't we?
maybe, yeah.
Lori just
We'll-
said that
we'll-
there was a couple in September.
I think so.
We'll figure out exactly what that number is. It won't be 7917, I don't think. But that was one area where we were so far behind that,
Yeah, that we needed to do it.
yeah.
So do we have quite a bit in the budget for next year to do a lot more?
Well, we put 7,000 as a number for next.
So do you think that'll be enough?
No,
No,
No.
But it's
but it's all we can do for now. I mean, Just as we won't really get to the 7917 this year, the 7,000 should still be more than we did this year, but it's just something that we have to work our way at. We did take $100 from the regular sidewalk improvement line, just that was one of the places to balance the budget. We could put the 100 back in, but 4,900 is pretty close to 5,000, and Martin and Sam felt like they could do a lot with 4,900. Street trip, anyways, and I'll go through the details on all that, but, we're trying to get everything done and still stay within the budget parameters.
Let's move on to
Okay.
Richard Saxton.
Okay, so
You've got the budget adoption schedule in front of you, and the hearings are going to be, so.
go ahead, Richard.
Package here, let me pass these around. Thank you for being here. Is this on? Yep. So I wanted to take the opportunity to give you an update on the water projects that we're doing at the moment, the West Tank and Pump Station, which is a regional project, and the East Tank, which is a city-only project. And the real reason I'm here is because we need to spend some more money to fix the tank that's in worse shape than we thought. That's kind of the bottom line. But let me go through and show you what we've got to date, and then I'll explain what's going on. Sorry, I forgot my remote. So. Okay, I'll see if I can operate this from over here.
Want to maybe get those lights over there, Paul?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. There you go.
So here are some photographs taken a couple of months ago. This is the West Tank, or at least the left-hand picture is a view from the top of the West Tank that I took with the North Reservoir in the background. You can see that big truck there. There's a guy standing on some red panels. Those are pieces of the roof steel that have been cut off and flown from the roof to be hauled away. The large kind of yellow circle there, that is the top of the new central support column that is being put in that tank, or has now been put in that tank, to hold up the new roof. Here's a view taken from a lift. This was when the roof had been taken off the West Tank. The cone on the right hand side that you can see, the funnel, that is an overflow pipe. There are different designs, but what's informative, if you look at the right-hand photograph, you can see that the top of that overflow is actually slightly above the brackets that hold the beams on the edge of the roof. And if you remember, 7 of those 30 beams collapsed into the bottom of the tank, hence really kick-starting the need for this project. So we made sure that when the new roof went back on, which you'll see in a minute, we lowered that overflow about 9 inches to make sure that we don't have a tide line and a rust line right up underneath those brackets. What you're looking at there, the kind of the green coloration, that's a zinc primer that they put on after they blasted the tank. So here's a photograph showing the new column and the new beams inside the West Tank, and this is similar to what we will be needing to do now on the East Tank as well. So I wanted to show you these pictures so you have a feel for that scope of work. Some recent photographs taken of the exterior of the West Tank. You can see there on the left I've pointed to the roughly 10-foot square door panel. Basically get a weld, get a torch, cut the panel out of the tank so that you can get equipment in there to do the work, and then it gets put back in. The welds are properly tested, and then of course the tank is disinfected when it's put back in service. So you can see that we have a new exterior staircase, which is a lot safer than the vertical ladder that we had before. And then the associated project there is the West Regional Booster Pump Station. The left-hand photograph being a somewhat aerial view of the pump station. You can see some skylights there on the roof, which will be used to fly out the two grey pumps that you see on the right. Those are vertical turbine pumps, efficient pumps, and they are similar to the ones that are in the existing or the other North Reservoir booster pump station, where you pump raw water from the reservoirs up to the South Reservoir. This, of course, though, is to take water in the event that it's needed in the regional system, to take water from the west tank and pump it up into the western side of the regional system. Here is a photograph. We've glued together a few slides there showing some of the interior piping, just to give you an idea of what's in the pump station. A few other views there. The left-hand photograph in the top, that darker unit there is a flow meter, so that's used to make sure we measure any flow that either flows back into regional from downtown, or ordinarily we'll have a very low flow rate bleeding from the regional side into the west side of Florence to maintain water quality. So that'll be measuring that reverse flow. And then on the right hand side there you can see some of the bright darker blue valves. Those are pump control valves that are part of the pumping system. Anyway, moving on to the east tank, which is the real focus for today. This is slightly out of order. Let me skip to the next one. Here's the location of the east tank. If you're familiar with that, it's out in the Sumo Golf Course area, shown there in red. And I've zoomed in with Google to give you an aerial photograph of the roof, which will become informative in the next slide here. A little hard to see, but it's amazing what you can see from a satellite. So the lines on that tank, you can see there are, I think it's 20 that radiate out from the center, and then there are 40 that run around the perimeter. What's noteworthy here is that none of those beams are long enough to reach from the wall to the center column. Kind of put that in the back of your mind for a few minutes. So those are beams that are on the exterior top of the roof plate, which is contrary to the way most tanks are done. A little bit of history there. That tank was erected in 1992. It was a refurbished tank that the city acquired at that time from somewhere. But it's pretty clear from the weld lines and the recut lines and the way it's been put back together. This was an old tank that was reused. Here's a photograph of contractor removing a door panel that's just being cut in the east tank. Of course, we couldn't drain the east tank and do this until we had the west tank back in service. So we did this a couple of weeks ago. When you walk in, the reason I took this picture is not because of kind of the rust and the dirt on the floor, but if you look closely at both of those pictures, this is the single existing inlet-outlet pipe. Water has to flow in and out of this pipe. A big part of this project is to replace this with two separate pipes. Actually, we'll keep this as the outlet, but we'll have a new inlet pipe to get proper mixing in the tank, which is important for water quality. But again, the real reason for taking this picture is, if you look carefully, you can see some, what looks like some really heavy mopped-on paint around the vertical part. That's where divers have been in the past trying to repair things underwater. There's some pretty heavy epoxy that's been put in there. You see this scattered around throughout the tank when they've tried to repair this as best as they can when it was underwater. A couple more impressions for you. Again, this is the tank drained. You walk inside. There's Jim there for scale. You can see the central column. There's some pretty significant rust and pitting on the bottom part of it there. But otherwise, on the whole, the walls don't look too bad. You can see the rust in the weld seams, but that can be taken care of. And the floor has a few pits in it and a few that would probably go all the way through when they're blasted, but nothing different from the west tank. The real surprise and, if you like, disappointment was the underside of the roof, which of course we couldn't see until we got in there. But while we're looking at this, take a look at the right-hand photograph, and again remember that when we got up on the roof, we knew we needed to replace the vent. We couldn't get it off without grinding a bunch of the bolts away and pulling it off with some equipment. But this is a view looking down on top of the support column on the top of the tank. And what you're looking at there are the 20 beams that come in and rest on that support column. And you want to note there that number one, it's off center, and number two, there's an awful lot more beams on the bottom left-hand side than there are on the top right. So there's some asymmetrical loading on that plate. And there is no gusset. I haven't got a photo. Well, there is a photograph in a second here. If you look on the top left, you can see it's just a solid plate welded on top of the column. So you've got an asymmetrical loading on there. It's been there since '92. Hasn't fallen down, but it's not ideal. So I want to show you a couple of slides here, and I think this will piece together the story. The dark grey areas, and I'll flick between these two slides, the dark grey is where we have blasted the roof. The whiter areas where we have not blasted it. You can see that on the walls on the left-hand side, we blast it and it's sound metal underneath. If you look in the center there, you can see that as we're blasting, those aren't stars, that's daylight through the roof. So let me go back a little bit. When we first walked in the tank, you could see 5 pinholes in the roof on the right-hand side. Now you can't see the pinholes in this photograph because they're small, too small for the camera to pick up. Look over at the left-hand 2 photographs, and what you'll notice there, there are quite a few plates that have been welded to the underside of the roof. So this is where, in the past, I expect people, probably in '92 or prior to '92, there were some repairs that were done. And these plates range from 4-inch square to 3 feet long. So there's been a lot of patchwork of work done in the past. The other thing which you might be able to pick up if you look particularly at the right-hand side, you can see radial lines coming out from the center. Those radial lines are the welds that were done when 20 pie-shaped pieces were put back when the tank was rebuilt in '92. The sort of parallel lines that run up and down like lines in a tile floor, those are the original plate steel that were put on the roof and the original weld line. So you can see clearly it has been put back together. Okay, so clearly what happened when some blasting was done, we saw a lot more holes in there. But what's more disturbing is the location of those holes. Let me just go back one more time. If you look at the right-hand picture there, take a look at the radial lines, if you can see them, that come out from the central column. And then in between those lines, in places, you can see radial brown smudges, okay? Radial rust areas. Think about the way the roof is built. Those 20 beams that are on the top of the roof line up with the center of each of those pie segments. So the beams are halfway between those weld lines. And you can see in a lot of areas here, when you look at it carefully, a lot of the rust is occurring in the middle of each pie. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So what was going on? Here's a bit of a close-up. I got up in a lift, that's where some of these close-up pictures are taken, right up under the roof there. And you could see a lot more lines of rust. I'm going to estimate that if we finish blasting the roof, instead of the 5 pinholes, there may well be 500 pinholes, plus an awful lot of very thin metal in between. There's a video here which occasionally plays and occasionally doesn't. I think I'll come back to this if we need it later, but as an example, that's a metal file, right? The wooden handle's fallen off. It's just the pointed end of a hand file. I was holding it backwards, used the pointed end, and I just, not in that location, but I just picked a random part of the roof, such as about here, and thought, I wonder how strong this roof is, roughly underneath the beam. I just pushed up, twisted a few times, and went straight through. Okay. So the blaster had the sense basically to stop blasting before it did too much more. You can see in this photograph here a little bit, a couple of pinholes on the left joined together by a line of rust. In other words, there is no base material there. When you blast it to try and get a white finish, there isn't a white finish, it's just all rust. He could go right through there. The right hand side is a little harder to see, but again you've got a rough texture there. This plate steel, once we were able to get to that vent that I showed you before and reach in, it's 1/8 of an inch at best, and that's the native original steel. It's a very, very thin roof, so no wonder we got a bunch of holes. So left hand side there, I'm just trying to show the fact that the rust lines are lining up with the center of a pie there. You can see the weld lines running left and right. That's typical. And then on the right hand side there, here's a view taken standing on the roof. Now I had a good look at the roof before we bid the job. In an attempt to try to prevent any rust occurring between the bottom of these beams and the roof deck, people in the past, I guess, had put cork through there. So when I first went up on the roof, there was a good line of cork painted over, pretty well stuck in there. As part of the preparation process for blasting and painting the tank, the contractor got a high temperature, high pressure wash of the top of the tank and blew out all of that cork. What you'll see is underneath that, let me go to this picture first. The right-hand photograph there is I've got my head right down on the roof looking underneath one of those beams. You can see what looks like bits of filler metal that have been put underneath the beam. In fact, you see it on the bottom, delaminated beam rust. What that actually is a large chunk of the bottom of that beam over the decades, hidden by the cork with a nice moist environment, has leaked and, has rusted and collapsed off. The right-hand photograph here, the dark spot near the number 3 on the right there, that's one of the holes that appeared when we got to doing the blasting underneath the beam. So, long story short, unfortunately, the roof it's been patched, it's been taken care of in the past as best as possible, and it's seen its better days, and it's not really a safe roof to walk around on, let alone one that I'd recommend spending money painting and keeping. So in the package I gave you before, there's a cover letter that summarizes pretty much what I've just told you, along with some of these highlights. The reason I don't have a final price for you tonight is last week we were hoping to have a steel tank structural engineer out on site who is a part of the company called BMT, Brown Minneapolis Tank. That's a company who did the 2 million gallon tank at the South Reservoirs for you 10 years ago. Well qualified, good firm. When we asked for Maltz to go and look at some competitive pricing from their current Girard tank, who's out there doing the work for you now, versus some other people in the market, the good thing is there's a lot more competition now on this time of year than there was when we bid the job in the spring. So instead of only Girard being available pretty much, the good news, not God news, the good news there is that there's a lot more competition. So Brown in Minneapolis' proposal is about $60,000 less than Girard, even though Girard's on site. We are, however, looking at about $300,000 roughly in the cost to do the tank and the column. Now that's fairly comparable to the $252,000 that was in the bid for the West tank. The difference here primarily is that although this tank is a little taller, the trouble is there's some big high tension power lines that run on both sides of the tank, and it's a lot more difficult to get to that tank. They're going to have to take down some of the fencing and do some work. In addition to that, because we are needing to adjust the overflow on this, there will also be some overflow work and some vent work, and I need to get that expedited through the state, through CDPHE, and get them to buy off on that. So the scope is a little bigger and definitely more complicated. So I guess that's kind of it in a nutshell. The time extension pushing out to about mid-January is really that the tank contractor should actually be out on Wednesday this week. He couldn't make it last week, so he will be here to confirm what I believe, which is yes, that tank it's dent, it's bent, it was never perfect when it was put back in '92. But before we spend any money on the roof, I want to make sure that a structural engineer is saying, yes, this tank is worthy to have a new roof put on it. Once we've got that approval, which I expect to get Wednesday, I imagine that the scope of work that we've had feed for the order of 300,000 will hold true, and then I'd like to ask that you have a chance to review this formally and make a decision Monday next week at the council meeting. So I wanted to take the chance today to tell you the full story and hit you with a shock today and answer any questions you may have. So.
I do have a question. How do walls look like?
The steel on the wall is a lot better, largely because it's nearly always underwater. So you haven't got the same amount of air available. Underneath a moist roof that's really, really thin, it's a problem. The wall varies in thickness. It's probably about 5/8 at the bottom, going up to, I can't see the top, probably 1/2 inch at the top. So a lot thicker than the 1/8 inch or less that you have on the roof. So the walls look good. If you are observant and have a good look when you're somewhere nearby, you'll see some dents in the tank. Those have been there since '92. That's one of the reasons I want the structural engineer to look at it. It's had a roof on before. I don't foresee any problems, but again, I wanted to be doubly sure before you proceed with any more work.
What's a tank like that size of tank, and what gallons are those tanks?
It's a million gallon tank.
Okay.
So to put it in perspective, if you said let's just replace the entire tank,
Yeah.
it depends where you stop with the underground work and the foundation work, but the order of $2 million is probably the value of that tank. So I'm suggesting it's worth continuing to fix what you have there.
And do you think that roof was a lot thicker in the years, or that's the size?
You know, it's tough to tell. I think
Yeah.
it was probably only 1/8 of an
I've
inch.
seen a lot of tanks
Yeah.
redone.
And what's interesting actually is that when you look at the tank,
Yeah,
on the right-hand photograph, you can see a number of holes in those channels.
yeah.
Those holes are an identical pattern all the way around. I think it was leftover structural steel from some building in the 70s.
Are these air gap fed or backflow prevented when they're fed tanks?
This is fed off the high side, so there's going to be an ultrasonic level sensor in this tank, and it'll be tied to the west tank ultrasonic as well. Basically, there's a large feed line comes through Sumo, comes by this tank, ultimately through the tank with the new work we're doing. So the goal is to get about a 5-foot turnover in the tank. So it'll be controlled through a solenoid valve and through what amounts to a PRV.
Does the state require you to have an air gap system or a backflow?
Oh, there's an air gap. There will be an air gap on the overflow. There is no air gap there now.
Because I know out of state law, you either got to have air gap or a backflow.
I'm with you now, yeah.
Okay.
So we are going to, because the state will be focused on this, we're going to have to add an air gap in the overflow pipe.
Yeah.
The west tank doesn't presently have an air gap in it.
Oh.
We didn't alter the overflow pipe. It's not a big deal if we have to cut one in, but
Yeah. Okay. So it's well worth fixing rather than
it
starting
is.
with another tank.
it is, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Now, just to mention as well briefly that the total budget that we had for the booster pump station, west tank and east tank combined, even with all these changes, you're just under, about $50,000 under that budget. So we're still on the good side.
And we can put up with a few dents. What's a few dents?
That's
No
right.
big deal.
The tank was
Compared to a $2 million tank, we'll keep
Right.
with the dents.
Exactly.
It's lovely. Is it going to be in Florence? Is it going to be built in Florence?
That down.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, this one. Only if the sea rises a long way.
We talked about that before you got there. That's going to be our new river walk.
Ah, great. Okay.
But that's right.
Is that all for Richard?
Yeah.
Do we have any other business we need to attend to?
Well, they just got the top screen.
Let's do it.
Okay, as we discussed with City Council, I don't know, last week, I think.
Thank you, Richard.
We did find out that we received the Cops Fast grant. And the Cops Fast grant allows us, if we so desire, to hire a police officer immediately. We could start right now. Mike, do you want to talk about how you would, maybe come up and talk real quick about how you would see us funding that position completely in the current budget?
Before we got the money? No. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, the money would come, I mean, they would pay us, they pay 3/4 of it, but we would be responsible for 25%. Well, it doesn't matter, whenever we start it, it's gonna come. I mean, how quickly do they pay us?
I